What's going on? In today's video, I'm going to be commentating over videos which cover Ray Peat-Inspired eating. So as you know, I talk about Ray Peat and the ideas that Ray Peat presents when it comes to hormonal optimization, testosterone optimization, and things like that. And specifically now, I want to go over the style of eating that some people present when it comes to following Ray Peat principles, because fundamentally, when you understand Ray Peat's work, he never really talks about the Ray Peat diet. There's just principles. So in today's video, I want to review someone known Daniel Roddy. So he's a popular influencer, you could say, or someone who presents Ray Peat's information. And I'm going to be reviewing his two videos on the way he eats when it comes to Ray Peat-inspired eating. I'm just going to be commentating on how I do it differently. And also, one thing I want to mention, those videos are, one is from 9 years ago, another is from 4 years ago. So some of the things that I might say now, Danny probably does it differently now because he obviously grew in knowledge when it comes to Ray Peat-inspired eating and things like that. So I'm just going to be commentating on how I would do it personally. Another thing, I'm going to be looking at it from an angle of testosterone optimization and also the ability to build that androgen dense physique. So one thing that Ray Peat doesn't really underline is building muscle, so on and so forth, and building androgen dense physique, because Ray Peat mostly targeted people who are in a hypothyroid state, in a detrimental state, and most of these people can't digest food. They have energy issues and they're really on the low end when it comes to their health. And so I'm going to be giving it a twist to how I would change it, so on and so forth. So that being said, let's get into it. So Ray Peat. My recommendations is to eat to increase the metabolic rate, usually temperature and heart rate, rather than any particular foods. So that's one principle that some people need to underline when it comes to creating a diet plan or creating a nutrition plan when it comes to accomplishing their health goals. Is something that works for me will not particularly work for you. And the way you can test whether it works for you is by looking at your metabolic rate, which can be tracked very easily. That's one thing I like about the Ray Peat approach. It's very input based and you can see the output quite instantly, versus when you get into like hormonal optimization, this, that, and the other, you need to follow a plan for 4 weeks and you need to get expensive blood work done, so on and so forth. With this approach, you can check your temperature and heart rate and you can get a instant reaction to whether something is affecting you positively or not. And when you pay attention to those patterns, you can change as you go, trial and error. Also other things like your blood flow, how you feel, so on and so forth. So yeah, let's get into it. Most people don't realize how ridiculously degraded their standard of living has become. US. Nutrition is political, economical. The government tells people to eat beans and bread for a reason. Taking your temperature before and after breakfast helps to interpret your circadian hormonal cycle. Hypothyroid people often have very high adrenaline, cortisol, and other stress hormones during the night, causing the temperature to be higher before breakfast than after. So this is an important factor to understand. And how does this tie into testosterone? So for you to produce testosterone, you need thyroid. So if you're hypothyroid, which means your thyroid is low, your body needs to find other ways of producing energy to give you energy to get on with your day, which most people use adrenaline, cortisol, and other stress hormones to function during the day. That's why people who are running on stress hormones, they have high energy, low energy, and it fluctuates because they're running on stress hormones. So hypothyroid people often have very high adrenaline. That's why they're always ached up. They're just tense. They're on the go. High cortisol, which are all hormones that will lower your protective hormones and other stress hormones during the night, causing the temperature to be higher before breakfast and after. So with this scenario, you're going to wake up maybe super warm. You might think, oh, I have a high metabolic rate. But then you're going to eat something, and the food, especially if you're eating something proper, is going to decrease the temperature and the heart rate, because the temperature was initiated by stress, and the factor you included slowed down that stress response, lowering the temperature. So that's going back to the thing I mentioned initially, how you want to look at the patterns. What's it like before you eat? What it's like after you eat? So let's continue. So one thing he does is he has orange juice, sweet orange juice. The key thing in this particular point, it's sweet orange juice. The amount of people that I work with and just interact with, that they're very authoritarian when it comes to the rapid approach, where if they see someone say, you need to drink orange juice, they'll get any orange juice that they can find and they just drink it, even though it's bitter, it doesn't taste nice. So they're very authoritarian. And it does make sense, because especially when you're in a bad state, you're looking for an exact systematic approach to get out of that situation. But when it comes to orange juice, make sure it's sweet without the bits, because the bits adds fiber, adds food for the gram-negative bacteria, which can increase endotoxin. So make sure it's sweet orange juice. It's high in things like potassium, also polyphenols, which are phytoprogestins, and also polyphenols that inhibit the tryptophan hydroxylase enzyme that converts tryptophan, which is an amino acid, in protein, and it gets converted into serotonin. So orange juice prevents that. It's the same concept of how testosterone and DHT have an effect on the mood, because it works on inhibiting that enzyme, the tryptophan hydroxylase enzyme. So orange juice is very good. Another thing, the benefit of having something sweet, even though looking at it from a popular media view, most people start with protein. They want to keep it low carb. So people start fasting. If you're in a hypothyroid state, you spent 8, 9, 10, whatever hours fasted, and you've probably depleted your glycogen stores. You're probably running on adrenaline and cortisol. Cortisol, which is a glucocorticoid, which increases when your body is low on glucose, like carbohydrates, and it increases through gluconeogenesis to convert your muscle into glucose to fuel your body, because some organs in your body need glucose and function best with glucose. So hence why things like adrenaline and cortisol increase. So orange juice first thing in the morning is good. Let's see what he does after. So first he had the orange juice, which is nice. Then he has 2 eggs, which is good. Eggs are very good, easily digestible. The key thing you want to look at here is he has the eggs after the orange juice. If you're in a really hypothyroid state, having eggs first thing in the morning can cause a stress response, because eggs are high in leucine and protein, which are very insulinogenic, which means it can increase your insulin and drop your blood sugar, which can lead to increased cortisol. In some cases, it can make people feel nauseous or faint. I know Ray Peat experienced that once, having eggs first thing in the morning. He fainted, I believe. And then on the side, we have sugared milk with coffee. He's going to add coffee. That's perfect. In some cases, when I was in a more hypothyroid state, even having coffee like for breakfast would be problematic. I would wait later till noon, so on and so forth. Not because coffee is bad, it's because I was in such a bad state, and some people are in such a bad state. So I would get a bad adrenaline reaction from the coffee, because coffee is not bad. It's that coffee increases glucose consumption. And if I haven't had enough food and I was fasting all night, I'm in a very vulnerable state. So if you increase energy consumption, but I don't have that energy which comes from food, which when I have my breakfast and I wait a bit and everything settles and then I have my coffee, would work properly. But if I have it first thing in the morning for breakfast, I would get a stress response. So I would just pay attention to that. But yeah, sugared milk, he probably has low fat milk to keep the fats lower, and also high in calcium, so keeping the calcium to phosphorus ratio good, and not an excess amount of eggs. With this breakfast, he has a good ratio of carbohydrates to protein, so a 2-to-1 ratio. He doesn't really give calculations of how much sugar he's having per meal, so on and so forth, but it looks like he's keeping to that. So right here is one thing that Paul Saladino made a mistake. For example, when I reviewed his, he would cook the egg yolks. But in this case, you want to cook the egg whites because they're high in albumin, and you want to cook those properties. And then the egg yolk, you don't want to overcook it because it loses the nutrients in the egg yolks. So having it more runny is obviously more optimal, but fundamentally what's optimal is what you can be consistent with, what you find tasty. And yeah, let's continue. So then he says, sometimes after breakfast, I'll eat rice carrot salad. Another thing with the breakfast, what I would change, maybe what I would personally do, maybe add more salt. I personally want to make eggs. It's either hard-boiled eggs or runny egg yolks, or I do scrambled eggs and I cook them in coconut oil and some salt, maybe some strawberry jam on the side with the eggs. So I have a sweeter breakfast. It works good for me. And yeah, but overall solid. Also, it depends on what your macros are. So if one key factor you want to pay attention to when it comes to eating the breakfast, like you can eat all these nice foods, so on and so forth, but if you're not eating enough, it's going to mess with your energy production, because your body needs to compensate for the lack of energy that you're consuming by increasing cortisol, adrenaline. So here's a calorie macro calculator. It's on this website. I'll leave a link down below. And here you can just input your personal data, and then it will give you how much calories you should consume. So let's say you're 200 pounds. Let's say you're 10% body fat. There's a template if you don't know how many steps. Let's say you're an office worker. Let's just say your goal is just maintenance. Keep it like that. And yeah, then calculate. And that would be the goal. Also shows you what the walking distance is based off of the steps you inputted. Also, if you're someone that, because you've been doing it for a while, I'll just do better on 150 grams of protein. You can input that there, it will change and readjust. Same with the fats. And that's the principal foundation when it comes to following a Peat-Inspired nutrition protocol, let's say. Then you have what foods to eat and what to avoid. So if you need more personal help, you can just join the brotherhood for more support and help and so on and so forth. I'll leave a link down below as well. So then Danny has a carrot salad, which is very powerful when it comes to keeping your gram-negative bacteria low and just overall prevent bacterial overgrowth, which is good. He has it away from food because having it with your meal can prevent the food's absorption. So he has it separate. Looks good, but let's continue. So for lunch, I have some kind of meat or cheese with more coffee milk and usually a Coke. So the Coke is probably Mexican Coke made from real sugar cane. So obviously keeping the ratios proper when it comes to protein and carbohydrates. So looks good. So then he mentions he has oysters, which is very good if you have the possibility to have oysters 1 to 2 times a week, because oysters are very high in minerals, things like selenium, and also having liver high in retinol and other minerals is powerful when it comes to keeping the micronutrient deficiencies at bay and fueling the metabolism. So then he has, for a snack, I have a few ounces of cheese and more sweet orange juice or fruit when available in milk. With that, looks solid as well. He's keeping the ratios, optimizing for the calcium. The only thing I would pay attention to is the fat content. So making sure he's not over consuming the fats. Because I've seen just working with clients, people work better on lower fats, because naturally the higher fat consumption can increase serotonin, irritate the gut. Also, naturally with higher fat intake, you're going to get a higher intake of polyunsaturated fats, which naturally you don't want. But yeah. So before bed, he has some ice cream and more sugared milk. Looks very solid. Keeping the calcium high, eating easily digestible foods. He's sticking to the traditional Peat principles and things like that. So looks solid. The true method of knowledge is experiment. Very well said. And yeah, let's have a look at the other video. So here's another Peat-Inspired nutrition. And this is more recent. The other one was from 9 years ago. This is from 4 years ago. So the first thing mentioned is keeping the metabolic rate up is the main thing. And there are lots of ways to do it. And just to mention, that's like the principal thing. A lot of guys, when they get into this style of eating, they give into these shiny objects, these supplements and this, that, and the other. And they avoid the things that truly matter. And the magic that you're looking for is in the work you're avoiding, which is the discipline, just doing the things, the boring things that are meant to be done for a prolonged period of time. But yeah. Yeah, so this looks quite solid. He uses the Reiki approved foods. The way I would personally do it is I personally try to keep so the reason why he has the mushrooms, I assume, is to substitute for the carrot salad. So the white button mushroom have a very similar effect when it comes to keeping the bacteria levels low. And I personally, when I do those things, try to separate those from meals, because the indigestible fibers can mess with the digestion of the food that you're actually eating. I can't say that mushrooms do taste much better when you actually have it with meal, but that's one factor I would pay attention to see whether you see better results having it separate from the meals or with a meal. Then he has the Parmigiano. I personally never used it that often. I don't really like the taste. And the 2 eggs with butter, that's nice. Then the next thing, he has the guava juice. So he's not having orange juice, he's using variety, which is good. And then he has strong coffee with the sugared milk, solid as well. For some people, having coffee first thing in the morning can be problematic. So I would just pay attention to that. First, maybe have this without the coffee, wait a bit, then have the coffee. And yeah. One thing I noticed, he doesn't really use salt. That's one thing I try to get in, like sodium, plenty of salt. And here, despite the presence of all the required nutrients that would be adequate for someone with a generally supportive environment, a good diet won't necessarily be adequate for someone with a problematic environment or a history of stressful experiences. So this just underlines that, and this is what I teach in my courses. There's nutrition training, lifestyle, and supplementation. And under lifestyle, I do talk about things like your environment, so on and so forth. So there's few points. Diet isn't the only part to look at when it comes to optimizing your state. Yeah, so with this point, what I would change, so he had mushrooms again, cheese, ground beef. It's red. I'd personally make sure that it's cooked, because in some cases, the uncooked, the raw bit can be problematic. Again, he has no salt. I would add salt. And he has the coffee, which is good. The coffee is a nice introduction because beef is higher in iron, and most people have too much iron in their diets. So caffeine specifically prevents the absorption of iron. Vice versa, I wouldn't have orange juice, which probably that's why he's having the Coca-Cola with this meal rather than orange juice or something high in vitamin C, because vitamin C can increase the absorption of iron. And again, good ratios of carbs to protein. Maybe I would argue he's not having enough carbohydrates because the beef is higher in protein, so is the cheese. So that's the only thing I would pay attention to. The simplicity of things such as supplementing thyroid, progesterone, and sugar, avoiding an excess of phosphate in relation to calcium, and avoiding polyunsaturated fats makes it possible for people to take action themselves without having to depend on the medical system. So here he's having a beef liver, which is solid, high in retinol, which is active vitamin A, which is used with the combination of cholesterol and active thyroid to produce pregnenolone, which is a precursor to all of your protective hormones. With that meal, looks solid. Yeah. Making an effort to learn how to use techniques of food, hormones, light, activity, etc. is similar to the effort needed to work with a psychologist, and the effort itself is part of the therapy. So this is biblical, how work works on you. Authoritarians talk about protocols, but the only valid protocol would be something like perceive, think, act, which is the concept of trial and error. Like, take action, see how it affects you. And this is where it comes to KPIs, key performance indicators. Just tracking your temperature, heart rate, see how you feel, and think about those things and take action and introduce different variables and truly have self-awareness rather than following something that someone else is following, but because they're an authority, they must be right. Truly having an awareness when something helps you or not. So again, he has the oysters, which is solid for the micronutrients, carbohydrates. Yeah, looks pretty good. Keeping the metabolic rate up is the main thing, and there are lots of ways to do it. Like when it comes to these two meal protocols, and that's one thing I see in the rapid community, a lot of them don't talk about macros, which I personally seen is very fundamental when it comes to when I work with clients, knowing how much fats, protein, carbohydrates to consume. And this, he doesn't really outline how much he does. He kind of just eats the way he should and the way he feels like. And I think it's nice. But one thing, especially when you're in a stress state, your senses are blunted, like you're disconnected from the natural feelings of appetite and cravings. So you need some guidance when it comes to, eating enough on a daily basis, hitting that goal on a daily basis to accomplish your goals. So personally, the way I would approach it is I would have personally more salt, more carbohydrates, and I would track things, but fundamentally, this is what works for Danny, and that's great. And I presented to you what would work for me, and for you, something else may work. Hence why pay attention to the principle, think, perceive, act. And yeah, that being said, this was the video on reviewing Peat-Inspired nutrition. So that being said, I'll see you in the next video. Peace.